Combating Child Labor 2026. I'm John Leibowitz, Board President of the National Consumers League. And before we begin, let me extend our sincere thanks to Congressman Scott. He's been a wonderful ranking member of the House Committee on Education and Workforce. He's a former chair, and perhaps he will be future chair too. He has been a leader on child labor issues for quite some time. We want to thank you for letting us, for getting us this room, for hosting today's event. I'll talk about the other speakers in a minute, but I think I want to turn it over to Congressman Scott now because we want to make sure he gets a chance to talk and before he has to go back and vote. So, Congressman, why don't you come on up here? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and I want to thank the National Consumer League and Child Labor Coalition and our expert speakers and all the members and staff that are with us today for your work in securing a brighter future for our nation's children. You know, in 2026, oppressive child labor practices should be something taught in history, not something as an ongoing crisis in the United States. Regrettably, recent reporting has demonstrated that child labor problems exist, with an estimated 150 million young children trapped in child labor across the world, including, regrettably, some here in the United States. Nearly 90 years after the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, we've seen an alarming increase of child labor violations in the United States. According to the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division, the number of children employed in violation of child labor laws has nearly quintupled just since 2015, and the number of children illegally employed in dangerous jobs has almost doubled in that same period of time. The children should be thriving in safe learning environments, communities, and participating in other activities, but instead of learning and growing, we've seen increasing reports of children struggling to keep up in school because they are working under dangerous conditions and in environments where they suffer disabling injuries. Reports indicate that minors are working in meatpacking plants, auto parts factories, and other dangerous workplaces, and it is especially disappointing that this rise in child labor violations is occurring at a time when federal worker protection agencies are being starved of their resources by the Trump administration. For example, the administration's attack on the Wage and Hour Division have led to the lowest enforcement staffing levels since records began. Additionally, Republican states across the country are actively working to roll back essential child labor protections. Since just 2021, 30 states have proposed legislation to roll back child labor protections, and 17 of those states have successfully enacted such rollbacks. Moreover, Republican members of our own committee have been silent on holding a hearing to address abuse of child labor. Last year, I worked with Representative Alma Adams to introduce the bipartisan Protecting Children Act, which takes long overdue steps to strengthen child labor laws and implement serious consequences for endangering children on the job. Among other things, it would increase civil and criminal penalties for workplace injuries and deaths experienced by young workers. It would strengthen the Labor Department's ability to prevent companies that use child labor from profiting from it, and it would expand capacity for enforcement, research, and data. Representative Adams and I aren't alone. There are other members of the Democratic caucus who have stood up to protect children. Representative Hillary Shelton of Michigan zeroed in on the fact that penalties under the current law are too low to discourage child labor violations. The penalty for using a mailing list to send out sweepstakes promotions to someone who has opted out is almost 50 times higher than the penalty for child labor violations that results in a child's death. Her bill would fix that. Representative Morgan McGarvey of Kentucky realized that the Labor Department agencies charged with protecting children are woefully underfunded and understaffed. His bill would fix that. Representative Rael Rios of California connected the dots between the fact that children are hurt severely while working on farms and the fact that our child labor protections are the weakest with respect to farms. His bill would fix that. Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut cast a spotlight on the children getting sick with nicotine poisoning from working in tobacco fields. Her bill would fix that. So together, Democrats have laid out a comprehensive strategy to protect children from labor violations that endanger them and keep them out of the classroom. Simply put, it is imperative that we strengthen child labor laws and ensure that there are serious consequences for endangering children on the job. So I want to thank all of you for being with us today and your commitment for protecting children, and I look forward to a productive discussion. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. That was a terrific talk. I'm going to do the rest of my introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ray Serrano. But we're also going to be joined a little bit later by Don Beyer, whose grandmother Clara was actually worked at the National Consumers League in the 1930s, and then worked at the Labor Department during the Roosevelt administration, and was involved actually in writing the Fair Labor Standards Act. We have here Dr. Ray Serrano, who's right there, who's the Director of Research and Policy at the League of United Latin American Citizens. That's LULAC, for those who don't know. Sonia Vasquez Luna, hi Sonia, the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. Sally Greenberg, the Chairman of the National Consumers League, and John Jacoby, the CEO of Goodweave International. Thank you all for being with us today. And let me recognize as well just a couple people who are in the audience. The Global March, folks from the Global March Against Child Labor, and the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, along with many of you who I know are advocates, labor leaders, human rights organizations, and who care about child protection. So thank you all for being here. As we approach the World Day Against Child Labor, which is Friday, June 12th, the day that brings together governments, employers, unions, civil society, and millions of people to speak out against child exploitation. It's worth remembering, and you pointed this out, Congressman, that the fight for child labor protections has deep roots in America. While we've made a lot of progress over the last 150 years, that fight is far from over. It shouldn't be, as you pointed out, but it is. More than a century ago, Florence Kelley, one of the most influential reformers in modern American history, semi-modern American history, I guess, and a founder of the National Consumers League, helped transform the way Americans thought about child labor. At a time when millions of children worked long hours in factories, mills, mines, sweatshops, Kelley understood that American consumers had tremendous power to drive change. One thing that happened under her leadership was they introduced something called a white label campaign. Businesses that met standards for fair working conditions could display the white label, signaling to consumers that their products were made without exploiting workers and children. It was one of the earliest examples of ethical sourcing and corporate accountability, and that's an issue, ethical sourcing, that we do work on now, and including in the context of child labor with our Starbucks litigation. Among those influenced by the movement was Frances Perkins. Before becoming the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet as Secretary of Labor under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Perkins worked for the National Consumers League in New York City. And is Kirsten here today?
She's on her way.
She's on her way?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll come back to Kirsten a little bit later and we'll mention her, because she is a biographer of Frances Perkins. She wrote a really brilliant biography of her. Frances Perkins in 1911 was actually walking through Greenwich Village when she witnessed the tragic Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where 123 garment workers, many of them children, almost all of them women, jumped from a burning building to their deaths or died from smoke inhalation because the building had been locked by their employer. And by the way, it was locked from the outside. In the years that followed, Perkins became, as I think many of us know, a leading force behind sweeping workplace reforms. She helped strengthen fire and workplace safety laws, improve protections for young workers. And I'll come back to this when Congressman Bogert gets here. With his grandmother Clara helped write the landmark Fair Labor Standards Act, which provided critical health, safety, and education protections for consumers and teens. But because of pressure from the farm lobby, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, as you mentioned, has an exclusion for agricultural workers. Earlier this week, I went back. Oh, Kirsten, you're here. Kirsten Downing, who is the author of a fabulous biography and a member of the National Consumers Board.
John, can I just add that Kirsten and I talked this morning, and since we have such a great audience here, I want to add that she confirmed that Frances Perkins also desegregated the Department of Labor cafeteria in 1934.
I
So,
believe that, and that's
yeah.
a great.
It's a great little piece of history that not all of us know, but hugely important in the reformer, among reformer historians.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Earlier this week, I went back and I watched Harvest of Shame, which was a groundbreaking 1960s CBS Edward R. Murrow documentary about migrant workers in America. Looking around this room, I think only several of us on the dais actually know what this is, but it was an incredibly powerful piece of television journalism. CBS tracked workers and children, black, brown, and white, for almost a year as they went picking crops from Florida to New Jersey and all through California. And not surprisingly, they lived lives of abject poverty with utterly inadequate housing. Most of the children, of course, worked in the fields, so they didn't get to go to school. Looking back at that documentary from the perspective of 2026, two things really struck me. The first was that the Fair Labor Standards Act still has these specific exemptions for child agricultural workers today. That's just hard to believe. And the second, that President Eisenhower's Secretary of Labor, James Mitchell, was among those who were leading the fight for the rights of migrant workers and to close what they called then the agricultural loophole. So imagine if we had that kind of bipartisan support for stopping child labor today. We would be in a much better place. There are some people who are doing a good job on the Republican side. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, didn't he veto a piece of legislation that would have allowed young teenagers to work longer hours? But all in all, we don't have a lot of, there should be more bipartisan support for something as obvious as eliminating or reducing child labor. Both Florence Kelly and Frances Perkins believe that consumers, businesses, and government all had a role to play in protecting our children. The lesson remains especially important now. Even in America, investigations continue to uncover children working in hazardous jobs beyond their years with long hours, without breaks, without proper compensation. States, especially in the South and Midwest, but not only in the South and Midwest, are considering rolling back those protections. And I think our speakers will talk a little bit more, I hope, about that disturbing trend. And as debates over tariffs and trade policy reshape global supply chains, we face a critical question, which is how do we ensure that the products entering our markets aren't produced through the exploitation of minors? Fortunately, we have leaders in the room who are helping to shape policies, strengthen protections, and ensure that child labor remains not only a moral concern, but also a legislative priority. And we've already had the eminent distinguished Bobby Scott talk. Thank you. And now, hopefully soon you'll have the gavel too. But now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ray Serrano, the Director of Research and Policy at the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, who will share both his personal and his professional experience around child labor and the need for protection. So with that, I'm going to quit bloviating and let you come out first.
Okay, thank you. There you go. How's everyone doing today? Good. Very warm day. Thank you for the invite and for the introduction. I think it's almost weird to be here to talk about a period of time for me that was, I guess, a while back, but not so long ago. So it's always guided so much of who I am. So just a little background on me. I grew up in Idaho, southwest Idaho, like Nampa, Idaho, right outside Boise. My mom was born in South Texas, in Weslaco, Texas. She was the oldest of 13. And there's a long story why we know the exact number, but she went a whopping 52 days of school. We found her birth certificate, or not her report card from this one school. They said, this is years later, where she had reported that she wasn't in school very long, and her mom was like, I thought you didn't go to school at all. And she's like, well, they put me in, they took me out. Usually when the farmer got in trouble, they would put me in school, and then when the farmer forgot about it, they'd take me out of school and I'd have to babysit the kids. 13 kids, their brothers and sisters. My dad was the youngest of 9, and at the age, he left school at the age of 3, or in the 3rd grade. He grew up in Mexico, Michoacan, Mexico, and his kind of claim, he always said he was always entrepreneurial because he would cut nopales, he would cut cactus leaves from the mountainside and go to the city, taking them on the back of a donkey to the city to go sell. And my grandparents kind of blessed it because they didn't have anything, and so he could make this 8-year-old boy, 9-year-old boy who could become a prophet, who could turn a profit and bring money back to the family. This is how they grew up. This is how they brought us up, right? Like, so my sister and I'm the youngest of 7. And they would say it was seven kids, but 14 hands. And those 14 hands, they could pick, they could work, and they could do a lot. So growing up, by the time my mom's family were like the Joan family in the Grapes of Wrath. In the Edward R. Murrow documentary, there's a feature, I think, of Southern Texas families in that documentary that are traveling around. That really is my mom's family. Like from talking about from Arkansas to Alabama, picking cotton with sharecroppers on one side and Latino workers on the other side, to tomatoes, grapes, strawberries in Oregon, tomatoes in California. These little stories, windows of history that are just fascinating to hear. Sometimes they talk about it in a matter of fact, because again, with no education, they just see history as how they saw it. And I was mentioning about Alabama, my uncle commenting about, he's like, the best people I think I saw were people in Alabama. You know, when we go to restaurants, they serve us in plates. I was like, they always serve people in plates. He's like, no. The black folks, they had wooden plates and they were nailed to the table. For the Latinos, they served us in actual plates. Like a piece of history that no one really thinks about. But again, for migrant farm workers who were just traveling the country during the desegregation era, that's what they saw. So, bringing it back to Idaho. Growing up, born here, so I'm somewhat privileged in that sense. Dad was undocumented since Mazzoli passes in 1986. Most of his family gets amnesty. I raised in Idaho. By the age of 6, I am working. My sister and I are working in the fields. We were tirando costales. We were throwing the gunny sacks for whatever, onions or whatever. We were giving water to folks. By the age of 7, we were actually working full time because my aunt and my uncle had got Simpson Mazzoli. They went down to Mexico. They had a green card, so we worked under their social security number. So every summer, the summer ended, the school ended. It was a fear for us because we were back in the fields. At 6 in the morning, we'd wake up at 5. If I could just describe how the summers were for us, like you'd wake up and it was just, it was cold. Idaho's kind of high desert, so it's really cold in the morning, really hot in the summer, or in the hot in the afternoon. The house I just remember the smell of fried eggs. That mom would just start cooking fried eggs. The quickest thing you could prepare, and the house would just smell of fried eggs. We packed up the thermoses, the big water containers into the truck, and we would ride in the back of the truck to the field, and it was cold. And again, we would be there by 6 o'clock in the morning. If it was cornfields, we were short people. And I remember popcorn. It was like, the plants were like 6 feet high. You had to detassel and take out the tassel, so it was 1 leaf or no leaf. So the whole day you're just reaching up, your shoulders were killing you. Because these days were 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes 16 hours, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I don't eat Whopper hamburgers for that reason, because I remember, just stay in the field, we're gonna bring you dinner, we'll bring you dinner. It was always Whoppers because they were $1 at the time. But we made a fortune. We made $4, at the time it was $4.25 an hour. The federal minimum wage had increased to $4.65. Apparently in Idaho there was some at least what's what they told us, that we were exempted from the federal minimum wage. We were no different than folks working in restaurants. We were getting tips. So when the fall came, school came around, again, we were not forgiven. My uncle would come, he was nice enough, he did it the first week, and he would show up with a porta potty in the back of his truck to pick me up from middle school, to take me to Top Onions, which is basically cut the top part of the onions, put it in the bushel. I was so embarrassed by it, because to be a kid in school and then to go work in onions with your uncle picking you up in a porta potty in the back of the truck, playing like Manta Recodo, which is like big kind of circus movies, not circus like music. It was kind of embarrassing. My uncle, he was nice enough to say, "Here, I'll pick you up down the road. Just walk down there, meet me after school, and meet you there." But still, we were going to the fields, picking apples, doing onions, till 6, 7 p.m. every day, and on the weekends the same way. This was life. Working with other kids was not unusual. We saw it all the time. When we picked snap peas, there was these young boys that were probably 6 or 7 years old. They were fast. Their hands moved so fast that even the supervisors would comment how fast these kids can work. We should bring more of them. I was 13 years old, and there was a young lady who was around my age, and she was with an older man who I thought was her dad. It wasn't her dad. He was commenting to the guys during one of our breaks that her parents had sent her up from Mexico, and he had taken her in. I can only leave to the imagination of what a 13-year-old girl with a 45-year-old man would be, but that's the reality. My mom was super particular about my sister. She's like, "Do not let her out of your sight. You work together, you always work together. You always have to, you don't let her out of your sight. You don't know what happens out there." So there was a few moments where we were somewhat protected. We had Migrant Head Start. We had Migrant Summer School. It was really fun. Migrant Summer School, we were actually not in the fields. We actually had summer school. We had a bus that picked us up. They would. Those programs have seen their funding cut drastically this year and last year. So thousands, if not millions, of kids are affected by those programs. Rollbacks in child protections. To see inspectors to come through was rare. I never saw it. We never heard of them. We never heard of any raids. We did hear about ICE, we did hear about immigration, but we never heard about anything cracked down on immigration protection. And so fast forward to what we see now, unfortunately what we're seeing is that immigration and child labor go hand in hand. Why? Because ICE and the DHS agencies have specifically targeted the breadwinners. They're targeting the breadwinners, hoping that if they can get the head of the household and deport them and remove them, the whole family will follow them. What happens is they take the head of the household, and the rest of the family, the kids, leave school and go work to make ends meet. 2 years ago, I had one lady, she was from Fresno, California, just a wonderful young lady, wanted to be a physician. She's no longer a physician, she's working. Her parents were important. She's now, functionally, she's not a child, but she's basically a 19-year-old heading up a household of 4. This is the realities we have, and I'll close with this. When we worked in the fields, I was really fast. I was really good, and I would work. My sister and I were very, very, really quick. We would be assigned 2 rows, and we'd go forward with 2 rows, and we would come back with 2 rows. We were super fast with it. But the one thing is, when we finished a row, you just didn't leave and just rest under a tree. You'd finish your row, and you knew that they had this process called encontrando. Encontrando means encountering. It means that you could finish your row by yourself, but you would go back and help those who were further behind. Because you might have finished your row by yourself, but together we finished the field. And that's the mentality that brings me into this work. And so that's what guides a lot of us into the work that we do. And so, but yeah, I just wanted to just lay out a few things from how I experienced.
I just want to ask you one thing, Ray. Will you tell us how you made it to Washington?
So, big break. I applied for a Senate PAGE program. And it was Senator Larry Craig, and they had put the application forward. I remember on the criteria, they asked for work experience. I put farm worker. I didn't want to shame my parents for putting it, so I put farm worker from the age 13. But I've been working since the age of 6. But I had put farm worker. When I came out here, I had a farmer's tent, because I still had work in the fields prior to coming out here for the summer. had a clip-on tie, had never worn a suit in my life. But that was a big break for me because it was the summer before my senior year, and I remember coming out here and I just didn't know what I was gonna do with the rest of my life. I knew maybe college, but everyone was applying to Harvard and Yale and so forth, and so I ended up applying and I ended up doing my undergrad at Stanford, master's at Yale, and then ultimately my doctorate at Emory. So, anyway, you two are very complimentary for me, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Dr. Serrano. You know, yours is the story we want to tell about America in the 21st century. I think I'm going to turn. We were talking about your grandmother Clara earlier, before you got here. Just to remind people, or for people who came in later, his grandmother Clara worked at the National Consumers League, and then worked with Frances Perkins at the Labor Department, and helped write the Fair Labor Standards Act, I'm told. So that is a pretty impressive, and was a lawyer too, wasn't she?
No, just an economist.
Just an economist. Merely an economist. What is just an extremely impressive woman, and to accomplish all of that in that era, even more impressive. With that, we want to turn the floor over to you to talk. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for your involvement in child labor issues.
Thank you, John, very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's fun to be here, Ray. You're gonna make all of our interns feel really insecure. Stanford, Yale, PhD, all that good stuff. Sally, it's wonderful to be back with you. And John, John, of course, is famous for his FTC leadership and all this stuff, but
Really for my wife, actually.
yeah, but more so for the fact that Ruth Marcus is in the New Yorker. A very cool thing. Writing great essays on a regular basis. Thanks. I'm thrilled to be with you guys. I think I got invited because of my genetics, as Donald Trump would say. I loved my grandmother. I was very close to her. She actually, a little bit more of the story. She is the 6th of 9 children who lived, born to Danish immigrants, on a chicken farm in Northern California in Mike Thompson's district. And they were just farmers, grade school and things like that. But her dad died in an accident in like 1900. And so in 1903 or 05, she and her mother went to work as domestics at Berkeley at the University of California. So she was 13 years old, changing beds and emptying trash cans and cleaning things. But she did one of those Goodwill Hunting things where somebody said, oh, she's smart. And so there are 2 women that graduate from Berkeley in 1915. One of the 2 is Clara Mortensen, with a master's in labor economics. And so through a long path, she ended up at the Department of Labor, running the Children's Bureau under Herbert Hoover, and then gets credit, at least by our family, for having recommended Frances Perkins to Franklin Roosevelt to be the first woman cabinet secretary. And then again, family lore doesn't always work out when you compare it to other versions of history, but was that the only reason that they didn't make her deputy secretary was they couldn't have 2 women at the top. So but Frances gave her the role of standing up the Bureau of Labor Standards, which didn't exist before 1933. So from 33 to 57, she was either the deputy director or the acting director of the Bureau of Labor Standards. And so it was wonderful for me as a kid. People always ask me, how did you get into politics? I said, Clara Beyer. This was, my father was a stock car driver, racer, and Army officer. I didn't want to do those. My mother was a wonderful mother. But the Clara Beyer was like, all of her stories were about being the first woman to go down to the coal mines, and the people working 6 to 8 weeks, 12 hours a day, and most importantly, the child labor, which in the 1920s and 1930s was pretty epidemic in America. Most of you probably read The Grapes of Wrath when you were in high school. I went back 3 years ago and picked it up and read it again. Oh my God, it hit me much harder today than it did when I was in high school. Please read it. It's very, very powerful about what it was like in the 1930s in our America, not to know where your next meal was coming from. And then think about the immigrants today that are in the exact same position, who are just as lost and just as hopeless and hopeful at the same time. One of the wonderful things that my grandmother and the Francis Perkins and all those wonderful people in the New Deal era did was got the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938. And so now when we get to go home on Friday afternoon, we get to thank them for the 5-day work week. Or as all the young people who now join finance jobs in Wall Street, where they say, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday. You know, we're in a different place on that. Those are the first federal minimum wage, the 40-hour work week, overtime protections, and critically, the strong federal restrictions on child labor. Even now, especially with immigrant populations, people that are here without permission, we have to really work hard on the child labor issue. Because inevitably, you can have poverty, inequality, discrimination, lack of opportunity, but more than anything else, the inability to get an education. And as every immigrant family knows, the path to freedom and prosperity is an education. You certainly look, I represent Northern Virginia, which has an enormous immigrant population. And because of that, I'm a graduate student at George Mason University. I'm now taking Statistics 344. And it's, what do they call it, asynchronous online. So one of the first things the professor, who's from Nigeria, did, I would say everybody has to introduce themselves online. I have the only European first or last name online. Everyone is an immigrant from someplace else. They may be second generation, but they understand that it's the education that leads them forward. And when you're doing a child labor, you don't have that education, you have limited future earnings, you're damaged physical and mental health, you get abused because you have no rights and no power. And the Child Labor Coalition has that same wonderful spirit that Francis Perkins, Clara Beyer, Esther Peterson, and so many other people did. So I'm just glad to be here as a small part of the World Day Against Child Labor. I'm glad to be here with Bobby Scott, who ran off to vote. In 21 weeks less a day, I'm hoping that we will be able to christen him the new secretary, new chairman of the House Committee on Work for Education, and we will call it labor again. It goes back and forth. It's called workforce right now, but it is labor. And Bobby was a tremendous chairman, will be a tremendous chairman again. And thank you so much for the League, the Consumer League, for all of your leadership in making this happen. And Ray, thank you for your inspiration. Coming as a 13-year-old or 6-year-old farm worker and making it all the way through Stanford and Yale. You did pretty good. Thank you all very much. And thank you for so many people showing up today. Really, really encouraging to know that you realize how important this is. Thank you.
Starting out by cleaning rooms. That's an incredibly impressive. She's just incredibly impressive, and we're going to let you impress people by going off the vote.
I have to go vote. Yeah. And she made it to 98 and a half. That's the good news. So, yeah. So she made it till I finally got elected lieutenant governor. Then she said, "Okay, I can die." Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. And perhaps you'll have a gavel at least for a second. And next up is going to be Sally Greenberg, our chairman of the NCL, and she's going to talk about some of the child labor protection legislation that has been introduced this Congress.
Okay.
So Sally, why don't you come up to the
Well, thank you so much, John, and thanks for being our MC and our wonderful chair. I guess we switched roles. I'm actually the CEO, you're the chair, which makes you much more important to making sure everything runs smoothly with our board of directors. And we are blessed with a wonderful board of directors, and we've got Kirsten Downey here, and how lucky we are to have a biographer, not just of Florence Kelly, Francis Perkins, but who knows the entire history of the National Consumers League. And when I first met Kirsten many years ago, after her book came out, she said the National Consumers League really laid the groundwork for the Fair Labor Standards Act. I also work, I have a board seat at the Fair Labor Association. We've got Shelley Hahn here. I look at what happens around the world, not only to children, but workers in general. And a 40-hour work week doesn't really exist in anywhere but very developed countries. So we have been the beneficiaries in this country of the work of Florence Kelly, Frances Perkins, Clara Mortensen-Beyer, and we're extremely fortunate here, and I would like to see that happen the world over, because starting work at 7 in the morning and being done at 5:30, 6 days a week doesn't really provide you much opportunity to raise a family and do the other things, or have any leisure time, really. So that's one of my goals, is to get the benefits of the Fair Labor Standards Act around the world, and we're working on ways to do that. But I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about the laws that Congressman Scott referred to. If there's anybody here from the press or wants to know any details, we have them all in packets. But we do have 7 bills. We've got 2 bills that are bipartisan bills that have been introduced to deal with child labor. And I think the point has been brought home, certainly by Ray and others, that it really flies below the radar. And when you talk to people about child labor in the United States, they think we've solved the problem. Now, John is an expert in child labor in other parts of the world, including India, most specifically India. We've got other folks who are experts in what happens in the global world when it comes to child labor. But here in the United States, a lot of people think the problem is solved, but we've got living proof. It flies below the radar, as I said. And our job is to tell members of Congress and to be up here talking with them and getting them to introduce these wonderful bills. So we've got Children Don't Belong on Tobacco Farms that was introduced. It's HR 3335. It's got 62 co-sponsors. Representative Rosa DeLauro and Senator Dick Durbin introduced that. Tobacco, I don't know, Ray, I hope you never had to pick tobacco. I don't know if anyone here, we've got some young farm worker, kids from farm worker families who are themselves, I'm sure, farm workers. Picking tobacco is one of the most heinous, toxic jobs there is. It creates green tobacco sickness. So Reed Mackey and I, who ran for many years our Child Labor Coalition, and we went down to Raleigh, an hour outside of Raleigh, and we went in the middle of summer. And you think it's hot today at 20 degrees and a black plastic bag where you're picking tobacco, so you're 12 years old and you want to avoid getting incredibly sick from exposure to the nicotine in the tobacco. We think that's just wrong on every level, and we want kids out of tobacco. And so that is what the DeLauro Durbin bill would do. Representative Ruiz introduced the CARE Act. That's got 6 co-sponsors, and we're here to tell you we want more. So to the extent that this audience can amplify messaging, we need more support. We need bipartisan support for these bills. The CARE Act would raise the minimum wage for most agricultural work from 12 years old to 14, and for hazardous agricultural work from 16 to 18. It preserves exemptions for family farms. It won't surprise you that we've had a lot of pushback and a lot of opposition from the Farm Bureau and other really entrenched farm interests in the United States, and they make false claims about what the bill would do, like you couldn't work in your family's farm, which is absolutely not true. There are exemptions for kids working on their own farms, but we're not talking about kids, for the most part, who are working on family farms. We're talking about people like Ray and his sister who were out picking crops for growers. So I'm particularly interested in I think the CARE Act has been something the National Consumers League has supported for many, many years, and we would love to see that get more co-sponsors. Moving along, we've got a bill, HR 7002, Justice for Exploited Children. 9 co-sponsors. The bill would increase, it's basically increasing fines and penalties for labor violations, because the penalties apparently make a very big difference. It is the one critical factor that makes farmers and growers pay attention if they're subject to fines. But of course, we need enforcement, and so we need enforcement officers out. And right now, that we're very, very lacking across the country, even in good states like California, which we learned from a recent expose written in the LA Times about how poor the enforcement is even in California, which is probably the best state in the country in terms of its labor protections for children. You've got Congressman Scott's bill protecting children act. It's got 8 co-sponsors. That's HR 3997. And then we have Let's Protect Workers, which has a wonderful group of co-sponsors, 79. And we want more there, and we want them to be bipartisan. So we want to thank Congressman Scott and his wonderful staff for all the work you've done. I got 2 more. One is Congressman Chris Smith has introduced a bill on cobalt, the Cobalt Supply Chain Act, and that would ensure that any goods made that have cobalt in and refined in the People's Republic of China do not enter the United States under the presumption that cobalt is extracted in the in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So he's got 1 co-sponsor, and we've got Senator Josh Hawley and Senators Cory Booker, also with a bill preventing child exploitation, obviously a bipartisan bill. That would bar companies with repeated child labor violations from receiving federal contracts. And we are very supportive of that bill, and we think that that would have a great impact, but we need a critical mass of members. So that is what we're looking at, and that's why we're up here talking to members of Congress. We've invited a whole range of members of Congress, and we are coming back. This is not a one and done, but we want to raise awareness. You all will help us do that, have helped us do that by being here, and I want to thank Congressman Beyer for his wonderful remarks and his amazing grandmother. I just read a short biography about her and the women who started the National Consumers League, Frances Perkins, Florence Kelly. They are not the heroes, the American heroes that we should all have learned about in junior high school and elementary school. They should be as famous as George Washington and Ben Franklin. And so part of our mission is to do that. So thank you once again all for being here. I'll turn the podium back over to you, John, and thanks again. Let's get going on getting more co-sponsors for our bills.
Only 115 to go before we have a discharge petition.
Yes,
So,
that's what we're hoping for.
On the Bobby
Yeah,
Scott,
we want a
on the Bobby
discharge
Scott bill.
petition.
I'll just say one thing, which is when I watch Harvest of Shame, and again, if you haven't seen this, it is such a powerful documentary. They interviewed the head of the Farm Bureau, who of course was, and Edward Murrow, while he's interviewing him, also while he's interviewing the Secretary of Labor under Eisenhower, he's just chain smoking, he's just smoking the whole time. And of course, the Farm Bureau was the principal opposition to some of the reforms that the Eisenhower administration wanted at that time, and that still haven't actually happened. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, but hopefully we can change things. And to that point, we have with us our next speaker, Sonia Vasquez Luna. She represents the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, and also you're a councilwoman from Manassas City, right? So wears multiple hats, and Prince William County's as a delegate to for House District 20 in Virginia. So with that, the floor is yours. Come on up there. The microphone is yours.
Buenas tardes. Es un gusto estar aquí. So it's a pleasure being here with you and listening to everybody. I'm also from Virginia, so it's a great honor, to see the leadership that we had today. After listening to our prior speakers, I think I would like to share a little bit personal. I think when we think about what we have done in life, we don't think about whether we were, abused or child labor or things like that. But I was thinking, I was born and raised in El Salvador. I came here when I was 19, and I did have to work in the fields picking up coffee. I was really young. I'm not gonna say the age like you. We'll say 13 plus, but I was not 13. But as a Latino, we think we're helping our family, and we think we're doing what's right for them. And if you want to bring it to today, we still have high schoolers that they are trying to decide whether to go to school or go to work to help their family. So this is not only, young kids trying to do what's right, but for them it's just like pitching in for the family to make a difference. And this hits not only immigrant workers, but also, you know, the low wages, the same people that we fight for as the labor movement every day. But anyway, going back and becoming a little bit more formal, we wear a lot of hats, and it's my great honor in Manassas. We are like 42% Latino, and I became just the first Hispanic person elected in 150 years. So we are making a Thank you so much. Here I'm in front of you, proud to speak on behalf of the Labor Council of Latin American Advancement. At LACLA, we believe every worker deserves dignity, safety, and a fair opportunity to succeed. That commitment extends to the most vulnerable among us, which is our children. This is an issue personal for me. When I migrated to the United States from El Salvador, I came seeking for an opportunity and, of course, a better future with an American dream. Like many of the immigrant families, we work hard, we sacrifice, we overcome tremendous challenges. For a little bit, I worked 3 different minimum jobs at the same time. So I understand the pressures that families face when trying to make their ends meet, especially today. I know what it means to balance work, education. I don't know about leisure time, I think I heard. I'm like, what is that? But you know, we all are trying to do what's best. Today we're seeing reports very alarming about children working in dangerous industries, late night shifts, and jobs that expose them to serious risk. I think you have heard about that already. But too often these children are immigrants or children of their immigrants' families who are especially vulnerable to exploitation. Sometimes they don't know, they think they're just pitching in or helping or being good to their parents or their relatives. As a labor advocate, we know that when labor standards are weakening for one group of workers, all workers, including you and me, we all are at risk. Child labor is not just children's issue, it is workers' right issue. It undermines workplace standards, depresses wages, and allows scrupulous employers to profit from exploitation. Think about employers profiting from our children. That is why LACLA is committed to fight for stronger worker protection, safe workplaces, fair labor standards, and robust enforcement of labor laws. We support efforts to hold employers accountable when they violate child labor protection. We support investments in education, workforce development, and family support programs that ensure children are in the classrooms, at the playground, but no dangerous workplaces. We must also recognize that protecting children means protecting immigrant families. When parents have access to good paying jobs, fair wages, and workplace protection, children are less likely to be placed into situations where they are vulnerable for exploitation. Every child deserves a chance to learn, grow, dream, and reach their full potential. Every worker deserves dignity and respect. And every employer must be held to the same standards and accountabilities. Before I close, I want to share, when I was raised in El Salvador, there was a lot of challenges, but I can tell you the hardest thing today when I think about it is to know that the men had little school experience, or they went to school just for a little bit. The women, they went less than that, because if you could stand and make tortillas, who knows tortillas? If you ate taco, you have made tortillas. If you could stand and make tortillas, you couldn't go to school because you had to make the tortillas for the family. So my mom didn't get the luxury to go to school, and sometimes she still cried about her dreaming of going. So we do have a population of, for me, I can speak about the Salvadorian American citizens who went through this and who are still hurting from what they were not able to do. So remember, all these helps everybody, and it makes a difference. You being here make a difference. So on behalf of LACLA, I urge all of us to stand together to strengthen child labor protection, defend worker rights, and build an economy that values people over profits. People over profits. So my ask, before you leave, make sure you share, look up the next event, and also, like we always say, I think we say it too much, but call your representatives, whether it's a local, whether it's right here where we are at the federal level, we all can make a difference and we all can help our children. They all are children, and we're fighting to stop these practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those lovely remarks. I'm going to introduce John Jacoby in a second. He's here. He is the CEO of Goodweave International, which is an organization dedicated to eliminating child and forced labor from the global supply chain. So he's actually doing the work. We would hopefully like to help him with some legislation in the not too distant future. Before that, he worked at Oxfam and Open Society, where he did human rights and corporate accountability issues, and at Columbia Business School, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have an alternative path from Columbia Business School compared to, I would say, most of your classmates.
Atypical.
But we are so fortunate to have you here today, John. So why don't you come on up and talk a little bit about your work and about your organization. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. This is a good full house. I'm thinking about our speakers and also the lineage. We've talked about Frances Perkins. We've talked about Florence Kelly. I think about Jane Addams, visiting Hull House in Chicago a month or two ago, and then learning much more about Florence Kelly, Frances Perkins, having known plenty already. But we're all standing on the shoulders of giants here to try and deliver, labor rights at home and abroad to protect children in the 21st century. It's amazing we still have to talk about these things 100 years after those innovations in the US, but we have our work cut out for us, and I'm very inspired by what we've heard today. Appreciate it. So this is a chance to tell you a little more in a very short amount of time about Goodweave. Goodweave was founded in 1994 by a Nobel Peace Prize winner by the name of Kailash Satyarthi. You may have heard of his other Nobel Peace Prize winner of that year, his counterpart Malala Yousafzai. And they are champions to embrace the idea of protecting children, right? And one side of that coin is to prevent child labor and also child marriage, and then to enable education for all children, obviously, and especially in some societies, girls, where that's not an opportunity that's evenly distributed. So we're very proud of that lineage for us. Kailash is our founder, Nina Smith, our founding CEO, and also Ferris Harvey, whom Sally and I paid tribute to yesterday at a memorial service, who mentored Kailash and Nina on these very issues. So I'll just say a bit. We don't have a lot of time. There are materials outside. But the big picture globally is that the International Labor Organization and UNICEF estimate every 5 years the number of children in conditions of child labor worldwide. The number is now at 138 million children in those conditions. That's actually progress from where we were about 5 years ago, from 160 million. And back when Kailash was first putting in motion the Global March Against Child Labor, when Goodweave was founded as Rugmark in the mid-90s, it was well north of 200 million at that time. So we're making progress, but it's very, very hard work, and we're trying to get over the finish line, get to zero by 2030. So that's where we need collective action, political will, and the rest. In terms of who we are at Goodweave and what we try to do, it's everything alongside other allies in combating child labor and also forced labor in global supply chains permanently, right? So the World Day Against Child Labor, that's our chance to establish this awareness and pivot to action. So again, a full room, but we need all the bipartisan support we can for the kind of action we need from the Congress on this front. We're thinking about children in Kathmandu, where we do our work, for example, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, those are our 3 core countries, but we're also thinking about children in Kampala, in Kentucky, right? This is a range of issues across the world, including here in our own country. So just to try to do justice to the global picture, we partner with hundreds of companies, we partner with other hundreds of producer communities in those 3 core countries in South Asia to bring visibility to the supply chains of the carpet sector and of the clothing sector in particular. We also worked on other high-risk sectors for these scourges of labor exploitation, such as bricks, the hazardous work in brick kilns, but carpets is where we go deepest and most direct with, again, hundreds of companies across dozens of countries, and focused on where Indian and Nepali exporters can understand the risks in their supply chain. Those risks exist not necessarily always at the exporter level, but they can. It's in the hidden tiers of the supply chain, what's known as the informal sector. This is where you find the most child labor and the most forced labor, because it's hidden, and it's often hidden for a reason, right? And so you have to follow the chain, the supply chain, to those work sites, and we go to each one. And that's the challenge of the work, is to inspect, monitor, certify, and then label product that we can vouch. Our best assurance is that there aren't these exploitation conditions in the supply chains that we're able to access. And so what that then looks like to the consumer is the Good Weave label. So here's a nice carpet swatch, one by one. Didn't bring the whole carpet, but you get the sense. It's a beautiful carpet at scale. And then that's the label that we bring to the consumer, right? So we're partnered with a number of companies, including here in the US, on that. And what else do? We work on prevention and remediation programming. In other words, you don't cut and run when you find the problem, you fix what you find. Right? That's the spirit of the work we're trying to do, and we need a lot of partners and a lot of, in particular in communities, to remediate and enable children back into the path of schooling. And then the prevention work, which we try to do at scale, because that's the work to nip it in the bud, to keep children on the pathway to schooling when you know the risks are high. The grinding poverty, lack of education access, gender, caste, other forms of discrimination, and then other issues that we're looking at as root causes of child labor, including climate change, which is driving a number of other workers and children into greater vulnerability than before. So just a few vital signs and stats. 1,500 children or so that we've been able to free from the condition of child labor in the last 3 years. 146,000 workers protected under our standard, the Good Weave standard, with that label coming alongside in the supply chains that we can monitor and vouch for. Our teams have conducted 36,000 unannounced inspections over these 3 years, and we've certified more than 4.5 million products. Again, carpets exported from India and Nepal to about 22 countries at current levels. And then we're enabling education, prevention programming to help adolescent boys and girls stay on the straight and narrow with school. That's about 63,000 children in these last 3 years of impact. So our new 5-year strategic plan, this is about working with all of our allies, Global March Against Child Labor, the Child Labor Coalition here that's co-organized this event, and a number of other grassroots to global allies to, again, get to zero by 2030 if we can, by building collective political will, action by governments, action by companies, and the rest. Some of what we want to do to scale this is to bring to light these issues through our research. So again, I won't be able to summarize them in the time we have, but on the back table, and if you scan our 2-pager with QR code, it'll take you to our website and some specific materials that you may find interesting as congressional staff and other advocates here. This is a really important way to get the word out, is our research, show what works for business to do its homework and its human rights due diligence, as it's known, HRDD. Take it seriously, know where to look for child and forced labor, because you go to those hidden tiers, it may be the hardest to access, but that's where your risks are, and if you don't know them, it might get you back later, right? That's a business case that we were able to elaborate, and then partner with business to get to what's good on that front, and then we advocate, and here we are. So in brief, I just say that the greatest risks for child and forced labor are ones we can tackle. I pointed to the progress in terms of the numbers. We can see it as progress, even if there's 138 million children too many that are in conditions of child labor. We see it in the United States and obviously in a number of hotspots globally. It's going to take more from the US government than what we already do, and that's going to be more than enforcement, though that's a critical piece. I'll just name 3 specific areas, perhaps 4. Enforcement is one, right? We start with that. Enforcement of good labor laws on the books in this country and abroad, and enabling governments to enforce those laws, as well as trade laws that have been on the books in some cases for a while, but also new generation of human rights due diligence and other laws that relate to how business is supposed to address human rights risks and responsibilities. Technical assistance programs, you know, the carrots alongside those sticks. The US government has had a robust agency, ILAB, the International Bureau of the Labor Department. It is still there, but it's a shadow of its former self, and if we're serious about investing in opposing child labor and forced labor, including through our trade policies and our tariffs, we've also got to invest in the programs that the US government has and the people, including my colleague Sadiksha Nepal, who runs our advocacy and communications and came straight from ILAB. You know, a brain drain of hundreds was only going to get a brain gain of 1 for us at Nepal in Sadiksha's case. And I just think we then have a lot to do to shore up that carrot of the programming that ILAB runs. Procurement, the US government has a ton of purchasing power. There's a lot that's been written by other organizations on the ability to use that to establish high road standards. And you know, we talked to the Nepalis and the Indians who are trying to export, you know, Good Weave certified carpets to the US. They were recently facing tariffs of north of 50%. That was putting some of them out of business and at risk of putting us out of our own ability to make this difference in children's lives. And so if we can do anything to ease tariffs, especially if they're in the name of preventing forced labor and child labor in other countries, to then be able to say, we're paving the road for these goods to come in tariff-free, because they're precisely ethical and sustainable supply chains. That's the kind of incentives that the US government can create. It's something to think about. But I just want to thank again our organizers of this. It's a special engagement. I think if there's any time for questions, that would be most valuable at this point. Thanks for your attention.
Very thoughtful, and for those of us who spend a lot of our time in government, we always struggled with, like, you could work on passing a law. When I was younger, I did a lot of gun control related work for the late Herb Cole, but you always wondered about the tangible effects of the laws that were passed. And John, what you pointed out, aside from some very thoughtful views on policy, is you make tangible changes in people's lives. So thank you for helping all of those children out. We're going to get to questions very shortly because I think that's actually quite valuable. I'll just mention a couple of things. We've talked a little bit about national and international child exploitation, child labor issues. But there's also a lot of activity in the States, and unfortunately, not all of it is good. We have literally collected stories, and I'll come back to this in a second, about 10-year-old roofers, 13-year-old girls working overnight on factory shifts, 12-year-olds. Some of this was in the LA Times stories of last year, I think. 12-year-olds wearing plastic bags in the heat to protect themselves from nicotine poisoning while harvesting tobacco. A 16-year-old using heavy equipment to dig trenches for fence posts. Unfortunately, suffering a bilateral leg, multiple leg injuries, and having an amputation after a workplace injury. I mean, these are not stories from 1900. These are stories from the last 5 years. And journalists and labor investigators and educators and advocates have documented a disturbing rise in illegal, often, and hazardous, more often, child labor across the United States. And as we discussed before, literally dozens of states are considering enhancing efforts to weaken protections. I think I'll just say weaken. They're considering weakening protections for working children. Again, there are the exceptions. Mike DeWine vetoed a bill, and that's a great thing. But there's a lot of momentum on the other side. That's why the Child Labor Coalition and the Campaign to End U.S. Child Labor is finalizing a state-by-state scorecard. It's going to give lawmakers, businesses, unions, and communities a clear picture of where protections are strong, where they're failing, what must change before more children are harmed. The report card on child labor is a product of collaboration among dozens of labor rights organizations, teachers, researchers, unions, community advocates, and including the National Consumers League, by the way. We've reviewed, or they are reviewing, every state's child labor laws using a standardized scorecard and methodology. They've evaluated, they've used 34 separate indicators across 8 key areas: hazardous work protections, work hours, minimum wage requirements, agricultural protections, enforcement, penalties, transparency, and work permits. And I'm told, and Sally, maybe you'll talk about this more in the Q&A, that the preliminary findings are pretty alarming. Not to criticize people or families whose children work to help to make ends meet, but because just like in 1900 or 1960, when Harvest of Shame documentary ran on CBS News, we recognize that many young people, and I think you talked about this, right, are put out to work, both of you talked about this, by economic necessity, but no child, particularly in the wealthiest country in the world, the United States, should have to sacrifice their health, their education, their future earning potential, because the law failed to protect them. or because the laws were too weak. Full national and individual state scorecards will be released, I think, in August 2026. That's what we're shooting for, which will be just ahead of sort of the back to school period. And because there's no more important moment to ask whether America is truly protecting its children, both in the classroom and in the workplace. So the grades are coming, and what happens next is going to be up to all of us. With that, let me turn the podium over to Sally Greenberg to lead the Q&A.
Yeah, well-
Or to take questions.
Sure,
We have
sure.
all of us in-
Well, everybody's been very, very attentive. A couple of funny little tidbits. Today was supposed to be the congressional baseball game, but you look outside, I don't think the weather is going to allow for a baseball game, but if you've never been to one of those, I scored a ticket in the last couple of years, and it's really, really fun. But I think we've put a curse on members of Congress for their baseball game this afternoon, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe things will clear up. The other little tidbit is that we instructed all of our interns to FHB, which is shorthand in my family for family hold back on the cookies. And so we're keeping you here for a few Q&As, and then we'll release the hordes to consume the cookies and the soft drinks. But I want to ask Mauro, who is an expert in child labor around the world. You have we met yesterday. She has done incredible work. You live in Ecuador, but made a presentation yesterday at an event we were at. Would you raise a couple of concerns or tell us a little bit about what you're doing? And if there are other questions from all of you, we would be really interested. Oh, hi, Jane. Jane O'Donnell from one of my favorite consumer reporters from USA Today in her past life. But she's doing great stuff with youth media now, and happy to have Jane here. Mara, why don't you say a few things? Stand up if you want to use the podium, you can. But we definitely want to take some questions. If you guys will stick around, and we promise the cookies will be open season in just a few minutes. So I'm going to give you the podium, and then we can get to other questions, including yours, Jane.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for giving me these couple of minutes. I am Maro. I am Latin American. I come from Latin America and Ecuadorian, and I belong to an NGO that's called DYA. For more than 25 years, with the support of DOL, Department of States, and United Nations, DYA has implemented over 10 projects across Latin America that have helped to transform education, child protection, and child labor policies. Together, we developed inclusion strategies, municipal child protection models, and also programs of due diligence. As our achievements, for example, we have been working 6 years with blueberry producers in Argentina, and we also developed a certificate. And after a very hard audit, they were taken out of the TDPR list as a great success. No? But more than these institutional impacts, I think that the main impact has been the thousands and thousands of lives that have been changed through this kind of project. Today, however, and that's what we have been talking, Sally, many of these achievements are at risk. It's a combination of the pandemic effects together with the declining of investment in social programs in our countries, and shrinking of international assistance. We received the suspension order, for example, for 2 of our projects. And in 3 hours, we have to close many of our services and activities affecting thousands of children and teachers and small producers.
after these multiple crises, we are seeing increases of poverty, families struggling with basic needs. We are looking in the communities hunger, dropping out of schools that we haven't seen in the last years, and some of the adolescents are returning to work. We are facing new vulnerabilities. For example, in Ecuador, we have had increased the violence, and now the criminal networks are recruiting adolescents to work. So this is kind of new work and economical opportunity for the adolescents. We as civil society are doing everything we can do, investing our own resources, volunteering our salaries to keep programs alive. But the scale of the challenge we are facing is too big, only for us. Progress can be weakened in a few days, but together, this kind of meeting gives me hope. You know? Together, we have the responsibility to protect what works and ensure that the most vulnerable children are not left behind. Thank you so much for this.
Okay, Jane, do you have a question
Yes, I do.
for us? Okay, please.
So I don't know who should answer it, because I'm sorry I was late, I was
Just-
out of school.
Rama,
Okay,
John and Ray will
I
answer
just
it.
wanted somebody to talk, to say succinctly what, which company, what you would tell consumers, if you're looking, I appreciate the Good Week, we reported that. Something about like what companies are doing a particularly good job in making sure that the clothes they sell, the fruit and vegetables they sell, are not, don't involve child labor.
Would this help? If it works?
If it worked, it would help.
Thanks for your question, Jane, and others can come in. What we're doing as GoodWeave is taking the human rights question and down to a subset of the labor and worker rights question, and then to the most egregious forms of labor exploitation, child labor and forced labor, right? And so we can vouch for that. And so I'll speak to that, but just understanding there's so many different elements of what it would take to look after people, planet, in the context of what we buy, right? And so we are a certification that goes deep and direct on this child labor and forced labor question. And with that, there are about 180 companies that we have on the GoodWeave standard that are across about 22 countries that are then, including the US, as the largest single home of those companies. So I can name some. You will find the rest of them and all of them on our website, and I'm not trying to favor one over the other, right? You have, for example, Restoration Hardware, or RH. You have the Rug Company, you have Design Within Reach, Herman Miller, and Crate & Barrel carries a number of importers in the US that are then selling on, under the GoodWeave standard. All of these are imported from India and Nepal, where then those are our export countries where, again, we do this work with our inspection and monitoring certification teams. So those are some. There are many more on our website. And then you will also find that we work with apparel companies that we don't certify per se, but that we're trying to, again, work with them to demonstrate what it means to do right by their supplier companies and by the workers in those supplier work sites. For example, in apparel in Bangladesh, which is the second largest exporter in the world, we won't be able to say this company has it certified and has it right. There are some other trademarks and other certifications out there, like Fair Trade. Some apparel is Fair Trade certified. It's a harder one in a giant industry, clothing, to get to a good place on ethical and sustainable fashion and not fast fashion. So there's many more resources out there. Start with our website, and then again, many other ways, including the ICL Alliance, that brings together a range of certifications across a range of products to point to a whole range of social and environmental good that can come from consumers seeing a label and buying that label.
And, you know, that's one of the most important questions we get, like, who should we buy from? That's a good, you guys are the real thing. There's a lot of what we call fair trade washing as well. So that's why we're suing Starbucks, because they claim that their product is sourced ethically. Sonia, you picked coffee, so you know what I'm talking about. We're gonna have to, apparently, bring this to a close, because we've got some staff outside that is gonna try to turn the room. I think we could take one more question, if there is one. Burning question. Yeah, go ahead, Kirsten.
I just wondered, you know, we do have a global organization that's supposed to be overseeing all this. I wonder how effective the International Labor Organization is on child labor these days.
The ILO?
ILO.
John, you're probably,
I'm uncomfortable monopolizing the Q&A, so please come in, Ray, Sonia, John. I, in this sense, think it's a global question. The ILO is part of the UN. It actually predates the UN. It's been around over 100 years. The ILO and UNICEF are credible organizations, thinking of workers and children respectively. You know, it's the UN, after all, and the UN has its challenges, but it's credible research. The ILO goes deepest, I think, on its research and data function. Okay, the capacity building, the training of labor ministries to do what they were set up to do for decades, enforce the laws on the books. That's, I think, where we got to make a lot of progress, and that's where the ILO meets up with the national level, meets up with the labor movements, meets up with the grassroots, right? So that if we get connectivity, grassroots to global, and the ILO is doing its job at the global level, you know, then we'll get there, right? Great question.
and wasn't Frances Perkins very instrumental in propping up and ensuring, as was Eleanor Roosevelt, another vice president of the National Consumers League, getting the ILO into very firm footing, if I'm not mistaken.
The International Labor Organization would have been eliminated by the Nazis, as all the other League of Nation agencies were. The only one that survived was the ILO, and it was because of the intervention of Frances Perkins. And, you know, but they need to be urged to be as effective as possible.
Amen.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This has been absolutely, yeah, get cookies on the way. I don't want to thank our wonderful chair, John Liberal. Rose, thank you so much. Sonia, our esteemed panel. Thank you all for being here. Remember, co-sponsors, for anybody in the room who can help us with that, that is our main goal, being here today.